The drive into Lethbridge always starts the same way. The highway flattens out somewhere past Fort Macleod, and the sky gets so wide it almost feels like a warning. I hadn't been back in 3 years. My hands knew the route better than my brain wanted to admit. The left turn at the old co-op sign, the gravel stretch past the high school, the smell of canola, and something faintly like childhood that you can't name but always recognize. My brother Marcus was getting the town's Community Builder Award at the Lethbridge Civic Celebration dinner. 30 years of volunteering with the fire department, coaching minor hockey, running the Christmas hamper program out of his garage every November. He deserved it. He deserved every clap in that room. I was happy for him. I am happy for him. I just knew that going back meant seeing her. My sister-in-law Sandra had been married to Marcus for 11 years. For 11 years, she had made it quietly, consistently, almost artfully clear that she found me to be a disappointment. Not in a way you could ever pin down in a sentence. Not in a way Marcus ever fully saw. It was always the small things. The pause before she said my name. The way she'd summarize my life to other people. Oh, Claire's still doing her thing out in Vancouver, like whatever I did was too vague to be worth explaining. The way she'd change the subject when I walked into a room, as if the conversation had been about me, and she'd rather I not hear it. I told myself it didn't matter. I had said that for 11 years too. I booked a one-way flight into Calgary and drove down. I stayed at the Ramada on Mayor Magrath Drive instead of at Marcus's house, which Sandra had made feel like her house since the second year of their marriage. I told Marcus it was about giving them space during a busy week. He believed me because Marcus always believes the kind version of things. The dinner was at the Sandman signature. Circular tables, white linens, a podium with a city seal on the front. The kind of room that smells like carpet cleaner and roasted chicken, and the specific anxiety of formal events in small cities. I arrived a little late, on purpose, wearing the one good blazer I'd brought, dark navy. Simple. I'd learned a long time ago not to dress in a way that invited commentary. Marcus spotted me from across the room and waved with both hands, the way he always has since we were kids. I felt something loosen in my chest. Whatever else was true about coming home, he was always that. Sandra was beside him. She saw me, smiled, and turned back to the woman she was talking to without breaking her sentence. I found my seat. The table was mixed a few of Marcus's firefighter colleagues, a couple from their street I vaguely remembered, a city councilor whose name I caught from the program, and Sandra's mother, Elaine, who had driven up from Picture Butte. Elaine had always been pleasant to me in the cautious way that people are pleasant when they're waiting to see which way the wind blows. I ordered a sparkling water. The man beside me asked what I did for work. I told him I was a structural engineer. He nodded in a way that was friendly but didn't invite follow-up, and went back to his bread roll. That was fine. That was the usual. The trouble started during the reception hour, before the formal program began. Sandra found me near the bar. She had a glass of Pinot Gris in one hand, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She introduced me to 2 women I didn't know, friends from her book club, she said. Both from old Lethbridge families. Both wearing the particular confidence of women who have never had to explain themselves. This is Marcus's sister, Claire, Sandra said. She lives in Vancouver. She's been there, 6 years now? 8, I said. 8 years, she laughed lightly, as if the number itself was a punchline. And you're still with the same company? I told her I'd left that company 2 years ago. Oh, that's right, she said, though I had never told her. It didn't work out. I didn't correct her. I had learned not to. One of the book club women, Terry, I think, or maybe Terry turned to me with genuine curiosity. What kind of engineering? Structural, I said. I work on large infrastructure. Bridges mostly. A few transit projects. In Vancouver? She asked. Currently a project in Vancouver, yes. I've worked on sites across the country. Sandra made a small sound. Not quite a laugh. More like the sound you make when someone says something you find slightly implausible. She took a sip of wine. Claire was always very ambitious, she said, in the tone that turns a compliment into a diagnosis. I excused myself to use the restroom. In the mirror, I looked the same as I had in the car. Tired, composed. I had spent a lot of years looking composed in mirrors in places like this. I dried my hands and went back out. The program started at 7. Marcus got his award at 7:45. He cried a little, which he always denies afterward. He thanked the fire hall, the hockey kids, the hamper volunteers. He thanked Sandra. He glanced at me when he said my family and I put my hand over my heart, which is the thing we have always done. At dinner, I was seated 3 chairs from Sandra. Close enough to hear her, far enough that she didn't feel the need to include me, which was fine. That distance felt comfortable, like an old arrangement. What I didn't expect was Elaine. Sandra's mother had been quiet most of the evening. But sometime between the main course and dessert, she turned to the table to no one in particular, to everyone in general, and said, "Sandra mentioned Claire works in construction." Something like that. Not a question. Just setting something down on the table to see what happened. "Structural engineering," I said quietly. Elaine nodded slowly. "Sandra said you had a bit of a gap in your career." There it was. I looked at my plate. I thought about saying something. I thought about explaining. I thought about the 18 months I had spent working as a senior advisor on a federal infrastructure review panel, unpaid in the traditional sense, contracted through a framework I didn't owe anyone at this table an explanation for. I thought about the paper I'd co-authored. I thought about a lot of things. I didn't say any of them. Sandra looked up from her conversation across the table. She didn't say anything either. She just watched, with that careful expression, to see what I would do. "Claire always does things in her own way," she said finally, to the table, smiling. "That's just her." The man beside me, the one who hadn't followed up on structural engineering, shifted in his seat the way people do when they can feel that something is happening that they don't understand. I picked up my water glass. I said nothing. Dessert came. The evening wound toward its end, and then the doors at the back of the room opened. I didn't turn around at first. I heard a small shift in the room. The way sound changes when someone important enters a space, not louder, just differently arranged. The city councilor at our table straightened slightly. A few heads turned. I turned too. The woman who walked in was probably 60, maybe 62. Silver hair cut close, dark blazer. She walked the way people walk when they are used to rooms adjusting to them and have long since stopped noticing it. Behind her were 2 younger people staffers, I guessed, from the way they carried folders. I recognized her in the way you recognize someone you have not seen in 4 years but whose voice you would still know in a crowd. Dr. Patricia Osei, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure for the Government of Canada. Before that, Chief Engineer for the Pacific Transit Authority. Before that, the woman who had co-led the Federal Bridge Integrity Review Panel that I had spent 18 months working on. The woman who had written, in the acknowledgments of the final published report, that the project's analytical framework had been developed in large part by a gifted engineer named Claire Donnelly, whose precision and patience shaped the work from the first draft to the last. I had not told Sandra that. I had not told anyone in Lethbridge that. Pat had come, I found out later, because the city had quietly been consulting with her office on a regional transit proposal. Marcus's dinner had been added to her evening schedule as a goodwill gesture. She hadn't known I would be there. I saw her scan the room. I watched the moment she found my face. She stopped walking. She changed direction. She crossed the room past tables, past the counselor who stood up slightly and then sat back down, and she came directly to me. "Claire Donnelly," she said. I stood up. "Pat." She shook my hand with both of hers, which is something she does when she means it. "I didn't know you were here. Are you on the regional file?" "No," I said. "My brother got the Community Builder Award tonight." She turned and looked at Marcus, who was watching this with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something between pride and bewilderment. "Your brother," she said. "Tell him from me that the city is lucky to have him." She turned back. "I've been trying to get you on the Street Lawrence secondary span assessment. Your name keeps coming up. I emailed your firm last month." "I saw it," I said. "I was going to respond this week." "Say yes," she said simply. "We need the right eyes on that project. There are very few people I'd trust with the load analysis, and you're at the top of a short list." She said this clearly. Not quietly, not leaning in. The way people talk when they are not thinking about who is listening, because what they're saying is simply a fact. I heard Sandra's wine glass set down behind me. Pat stayed at our table for 7 minutes. I know because I counted, later, reconstructing the evening the way you do when something shifts and you want to hold the exact shape of it. She asked about my current project. She mentioned the federal report. She asked if I'd read a paper out of the University of Waterloo on composite deck design, and when I said yes, and mentioned a specific concern with the methodology, she pointed at me and said, "That's exactly the problem." I said that to the same author in October. When she left to greet the city officials, she squeezed my shoulder. "Email me," she said. This week. I sat back down. The table was quiet in a different way than it had been before. Elaine was looking at her dessert plate. The man beside me said, "Sorry, who was that?" "Pat O'Say," said the city councillor, with the careful reverence of someone who understood exactly who had just crossed the room. Deputy Minister of Infrastructure. She basically oversees every major federal infrastructure project in the country. He paused. He looked at me. "She knows you?" "We worked together for a while," I said. Sandra hadn't said anything. I glanced at her without meaning to. She was still looking at the spot where Pat had been standing. There was something in her expression that I had not seen there before. Not embarrassment, not quite. Something more like the moment when the ground shifts and you realize you have been standing on an assumption. Marcus reached across the table and put his hand over mine. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We have always been that kind of siblings, the kind who understand each other better in silence than in speech. Later, outside, while we waited for our cars in the cold Alberta night and it was cold, that specific November cold that bites at the back of your neck and smells like frost and prairie, Marcus and I stood together for a few minutes. "You should have told me," he said. "Told you what?" He gestured vaguely, meaning all of it. "It didn't come up," I said. "Claire, it really didn't. And I didn't want to make your week about me." He was quiet for a moment. He put his arm around my shoulders the way he used to when we were teenagers waiting for the school bus in weather just like this. "Sandra didn't know," he said. Not defending her. Just placing the fact down carefully. "I know she didn't. She should have asked." "I thought about that." "Yeah," I said. "She should have asked." We stood there a while longer. The city hummed quietly around us. The way small cities do at night, not silent. Not loud. Just present. Sandra came out while we were still standing there. She had her coat on and her keys in her hand. She looked at me for a moment, and I looked back at her, and there was a long pause that contained 11 years of small accumulations. She said, "I didn't know you worked on federal projects." It was not an apology. She is not someone who apologizes easily, and I had long since stopped waiting for it. But it was something, an acknowledgement that a door had opened and she had not known it was there. "It didn't come up," I said again. She nodded once, tight and careful, and went to find Marcus. I stood in the parking lot for another minute alone. The cold worked its way through my blazer and I didn't mind it. Overhead, the sky was the particular clear black that you only get on the prairies in winter, with stars so dense they look almost structural load-bearing. I always think, which is probably a professional habit. I thought about the Street Lawrence project. I thought about the paper from Waterloo. I thought about the email I'd send Monday morning. I thought about the fact that I had stood in that room for 2 hours while someone decided what I was, and I had not corrected them, and the truth had eventually arrived without my help. It does that, sometimes. Not always. Not often enough. But sometimes the room adjusts itself, and all you have to do is still be standing when it does. I got in my car. The heater took a minute to catch. The radio found a CBC station playing something slow and instrumental, and I left it there, and I drove back toward the hotel through streets that were familiar and quiet and mine in a way that had nothing to do with belonging to them. I was passing the old high school when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Marcus. A photo. Him and me from earlier in the evening, standing in the hall, me laughing at something I couldn't remember now. Under it he had written, "Proud of you. Have been for a long time. Sorry it didn't get said enough." I pulled over. I sat with that for a minute in the dark. Then I put the car in drive, and I kept going.